Quiet, friends. I have a tale to tell before the tavern closes tonight. I have come a very long way and seen so many places. I've heard many stories, and I'm happy to be here now to share them with you. So gather round. I have told you before that magic is very real, and in this world it comes in many forms. Tonight I want to tell you all of the magic I have personally seen, from the tremendous and powerful to the silent and subtle. In my travels I have met few spellcasters. Most do not seek acknowledgement, and small are their numbers to begin with. This tale follows the journey of a young man who would one day be a sorcerer of tremendous power. When I met him, he was an old man with a tired heart. His white and red robes had faded, but his eyes were as the night sky. Where there had been whites were black, and where his eyes had once been green now sat two white and gray eyes that shimmered like the stars, all of which I would learn is common for practitioners of magical arts. Although those who call upon the divines to use their magic often have eyes more like the sun, but that is a story for another night. His name was Florian. Freckled was his face and soft was his smile. He was born in the Waywind Mountains, where rain cascades down the pines in unending torrents, where wild men run free. His village was a small one, and his mother spent her hours tending to the people of the town using tinctures and elixirs. As Florian grew, he too became interested in the medicines his mother made, and he became her gatherer. The first time he went out to gather herbs for her, she kissed him upon the forehead and made him promise to be safe. This offered him his first glimpse of little magic, a thing we all have felt. To the end of his days, he could feel his mother's lips upon his forehead and a tightness in his heart any time danger was near, as that promise was as good as any spell he would later learn. For little magic is just that. The death of one's heart upon losing a friend, the courage offered when you have someone to live for, the healing of laughing with your friends. And so it went for many years, gathering plants in the wilds for his mother. However, the Waywind Mountains can be cruel, and one day when looking for ingredients, Florian looked up along the cliffside and saw above him a dragon. Now, this dragon was young, only the size of a horse, but Florian knew if the creature had seen him, his life was truly forfeit. He stalked through the brush, but it was futile. The beast launched itself down the cliffs, its dull auburn scales shining in the light as its mouth began to fill with flames. Florian began to weep, the little magic of his promise to his mother clutching his heart so tightly that he could barely breathe, the terror of breaking that promise crippling his legs. He heard the cascade of wind and a great rustling of branches. He opened his eyes to face his death, but before him stood a man in a white and red jacket, potions hanging at his hips, and eyes that danced like the night sky. The dragon stopped its advance and locked eyes with the man, and the two simply stood. Florian could see no fear in the posture of the man as he stared the dragon in the eyes. After a moment, the beast simply turned and returned to its perch upon the cliff. The man checked to see that Florian was all right, and the young boy asked him what had just happened. The older man simply smiled and whispered to the wind. He explained that he was a lore master, a magician of the mountains. Without a moment's apprehension, Florian asked the man to teach him. And so began Florian's new life. In the mornings, he would bid his mother goodbye and go to the tower of the magician deep in the wilds. There, Florian learned the secrets of the man's magic. The first thing he learned was the art of horticulture, as a magician can do no magic without the power granted to them by their Star Watcher's potion. It's an odd brew that can be made hundreds of ways, but to consume it awakens the mind to the most minuscule of sounds. As a magician, first and foremost, must learn to listen. For the simplest of spells are those where a magician hears and speaks to the world around them, bidding a mouse to watch their tent, or a flower to grow faster, calling wolves from the wild, or debating with a dragon in the silence of the blowing wind. A magician's greatest skill is this, for it takes far less work than what Florian learned next. And it took Florian years to master just this, the mixing of the Star Watcher's brew, the calm to speak to animals, the empathy to speak to plants under his feet. By the time he had learned this, he was 29. His mother had passed on, and so had his mentor. So alone, he would sit in the tower filled with books, learning of little magic and the art of listening, learning to control his own emotions, how to offer them as a gift to other humans and the world itself. The valley had begun to stir, as bandits began to make their homes in the mountains around his small town. He would send the deer to spy on them, the birds to follow them, the plants to grow thick in their path, but it wasn't enough. One of his animal friends warned him that an attack was surely coming. Florian committed himself to study. Powerful magic requires more than just one potion, and he would learn to make a great many draughts and elixirs that would allow him to do more than speak to animals and listen to the wind. Potions that would allow him to speak to the air itself, bidding it lift him into its embrace. Elixirs that would allow him to see through the eyes of the beasts he knew best. Draughts that gave him control over flames. Even spells to manipulate the minds of men. He successfully protected his town, bending flames and wind to be his weapons, the wolves and bears becoming his army. Something began to nag at him, however. All of this power must come from somewhere, must mean something. So he resigned himself to travel the world, learning as many recipes for new spells as he could drink, and as much on the origin of magic as he could comprehend. In his travels, he learned how to put his emotions into objects, making them magical in nature, a sword that bursts into flames when drawn, and a necklace that filled his magical energies with those in the air, so he no longer had to make a potion to do such. He learned spells to conjure illusions of air and convince stone to upturn and defend him. He learned that some magicians even had control over life and death, the speed at which a wound would close, and the ability to animate a corpse. Then, the unimaginable happened. Few remember the days of the cataclysm, the days when our world faded and became far more monstrous than it once had been. Florian was one of many who answered the call to arms to defend his homeland, and though he was not the person who slew the Lord of Sorrow, his contribution to the war is one of great importance. Florian had wandered alone for days through the darkest forest in our mountains, the Volsgarten. In the shade of the trees, many monsters make their homes. Dragons, trolls, minotaurs, and creatures unnamed. He faced beasts of all sorts, and the forces of the Lord of Sorrows often arose to stop him as he summoned the powers of storms and flames to wander deeper and deeper into the wild. And, in the center of the wood, he found what he sought. A clearing in the trees, a single stone pillar standing to be seen. Across the stone were drawings, letters, thoughts of a world that no one had truly once had, but where a god once recorded their innermost thoughts. And upon this stone Florian meditated, beside it for days, pondering the patterns and allowing the wind to whisper the story of the day when a god stood where he now stood. It took him a season to comprehend the secret of that ancient place, to learn its true message. On the final day of the War of Sorrows, Florian stood shoulder to shoulder with soldiers, sorcerers, sellswords, and swindlers. In all of their eyes fear could be seen, but not in Florian's. When the battle began, he could see the seas of evil rise, abominations from the sky, demons in the distance, and beasts of all sorts charging towards him and the brave few who stood against the Lord of Sorrow. The armies of our lands roared and charged towards the enemy, although the chances of victory were slim to none. Florian began to search for the cries of his people, the shrieks of beasts, the whine of the wind on a day when men die. He called all of the magic from within himself, dredging the depths of his energies as he began to sing with the world, his heart pumping with all life around it, his breath the same whistle as the wind, his body devoted to nothing but the hearing and speaking of the world. It wasn't enough. He felt the tremendous weight of a monstrous beast crushing him to the floor beneath its taloned front feet. He opened his eyes to attempt to speak to the creature as his master had once done, but he had no more magic remaining. To connect to the entire world at once had emptied him. As a magician, his relationship with the world was almost always one of acceptance, one of understanding the way things are to pass. Death is natural, and he resigned himself to allow this to be the moment of his end. When suddenly, a thread tied tight around his heart. He felt warmth upon his forehead where his mother had once kissed him and made him promise to be safe. Her little magic, something far simpler than the calling of storms and the taming of beasts he had mastered. The simple magic of a promise to one you love. With that, it was like a fire was started within him. All the energy he had lost returned and doubled and tripled until he cried into the air with command. As flame is wild, while wind is free, allow me, your child, to be fury for thee. My dearest world, you have been burned, my wings unfurled, my skin be turned. You have been abused by men such as me, your magic misused. Take my body free. I will be rage for you, O beautiful life. Allow us to renew, free of strife. For the arrogance of men will never truly fade. Sorrows will rise again, but I am yours unafraid. For every stream, every river, every flame, and every shiver. For every child who smiles, for every breath and its trials. I will be champion for thee. I will be proud simply to see all the beauty of a sunny day, all the joy in a day that's gray. No greater purpose there is. Those who were present said the battle fully stopped. The demons stared at the black spot in the sky where Florian had been hefted, and all soldiers dropped their blades and watched as that black spot grew. It was slow at first, but they could hear his song all around. When he finally descended before the armies of men and the demons crafted by the Lord of Sorrow, There stood the largest dragon the world has ever seen. Colossal in size, monstrous and powerful, it said the demons shook with fear, and Florian, now chosen by the world itself, simply whispered to the wind a single word: "Leave." The demons retreated back across the sea to the continent of humanity's birth. The army of the Lord of Sorrow had been banished back to their master. Florian had sacrificed his humanity to be champion of our world, and in the moment, people rejoiced and thanked him for his sacrifice. However, centuries passed, and Florian became seen as an ancient monster as memory faded into legend, and legend faded into myth. Knights would attempt to slay him in armies by the hundreds. Florian chose not to fight back, but simply to ignore the men as they could not hurt him. However, that would change. A young magician named Percival, who hailed from the east, had mastered a spell so dangerous and strong that in a single strike he cut a hole through Florian's wing. He tried to fly away, to escape, but the damage was too great and he could not fly far. He crashed in our mountains to the west, and there he stays. When I met Florian, he was resting in his valley, a verdant forest free of storms. He was kind and allowed me to stay with him for as long as I would like, and so I did. I stayed with Florian, the Lord of Dragons, for months, learning ancient lore and stories forgotten by all men who walk the world. He told me his story, and told me that one day, when he heals, he would like to fly back to the west, to finish the fight with the demons conjured by the Lord of Sorrows. For even though it was men who hurt him the most, Florian is a magician. And magicians are knowers of all that is true, every flower, every deer, every human, and every dragon. Though wounded by men, he held no anger in his heart. And when I finally departed his mountain range, he told me one last thing. He told me to remember my little magic. He told me to hold those I love close and promise to be alive for them. He told me to bask in the moments where my eyes weep, to see all things around me and adore them as they are all creatures of little magic, emotion in its truest form, as we all are. My next tale will be one of another magician, a more modern sorcerer, who strides the battlefields of the world using magic as a weapon far mightier than any sword. I have a tome of tales from every nation to share with you all. I have seen many monsters, many heroes. I have learned of the magic offered by the goddess, and the magic humans can conjure for themselves. I have seen warfare, and I have tales of peace. I cannot wait to tell them all to you. Good night, and thank you.
Legends of Lorelei is a narrative fiction podcast by Livewire Multimedia Stories. The Bard is voiced by Gwen Fullman. Written by Gwen Fullman. Co-executive produced by Gwen Fullman and Elizabeth Fullman, with music by Gwen Fullman. If you enjoyed what you just listened to, please consider contributing to our Patreon. If you would like updates on this project or any of our other projects, come follow us on Instagram at Livewire Multimedia, on Tumblr at Livewire Media, or subscribe to us on YouTube at Livewire Multimedia Stories. Thank you for listening.